Okay, if I do start to, my speech starts disappearing or something because I've got a dodgy Wi-Fi here, so if anything starts going wrong, someone message and shout and I'll pause
Yep,
and try and
we'll let you know.
reconnect that. Cool. All right then. So make a start. So everyone can see my desktop, yeah? I need more monitors. I need sets like Jason. I can't do it. Too. Okay. So I shall start with, oh, I can hear myself now. A weird echo. No? Okay.
All good on
So
our
I'll
end.
start with, yeah. Right, so I'll start with, who am I? Probably most of you will have some idea who I am, or you might have used some of my tools before. If not, why not? You should be. Um, I actually do have a bit of a rant on Twitter every now and again if people still use certain tools and not use Waymore. Not just because I'm, a bit of an egotist or anything, but it generally is better than some of the older tools, and there are like certain reasons for that. What's fine saying? Oh, no. Okay. Um, so yeah, there's a list of my tools, where I am on Twitter, GitHub, Discord, etc. If you want to try and find me. So I made a lot of notes in the past few days to try and make sure I don't forget anything and cover as much for you guys as possible. So apologies if I stall every now and again while I'm trying to check my notes. You want to make sure you've got the latest versions of Waymore and XN LinkFinder. I think that's version 3.7 and 5.3 respectively at the moment.
And just a
Okay.
heads up, we posted that earlier. I think it's in class chat, if I'm not mistaken, or was that in general?
Cool.
You
Okay.
posted it, and then I reposted it as well. So if y'all need to
Yeah.
get the updated versions, I know he's been working hard on that to get ready for this.
Yeah. Well, while I've been getting ready for this, I've actually, it's been good in some ways because I've started finding a few little issues here and there which I've managed to correct in the past few days. So also I did a recent change to most of my tools, so it will actually show, if you run it, it will show the kind of the current version and whether it's outdated or the latest version, sort of similar to project discovery tools. So that's a bit more helpful as well, so you know if you need to upgrade. Unfortunately, there isn't an easy -u to upgrade at the moment like project discovery, because I'm not as good as project discovery yet. So we'll jump into archived URLs. I mean, why archives? So I assume most of you have some idea of what internet archives are and why that data is valuable for bug hunters and red teamers. If not, there was a Nahamsec video recently called "Hacking with the Internet Time Machine." I'll just a link to that. So that's worth a watch if you're not sure. If you still think, well, why am I getting these URLs? What good are they? Before we talk about Waymore, let's start at the beginning and talk about some of the other tools that get archive data. So in the beginning, God created wayback URLs. God being Tom Nom Nom, of course. So you can see a wayback URLs is fairly basic to run. It's not really, it doesn't really tell you much on help because it's just does what it does. It doesn't need to be that complicated, but it does have some issues. So if I'm just going to go to the main code here. So it says it searches the Wayback Archive on the help, and that's all it says. But if you look in the code, it does actually, it gets URLs from Wayback, Common Crawl, and Virus Total. If I search Common Crawl, we can actually see. So Common Crawl has what it calls indexes, and at the moment I think there are about 97 indexes, which you can see here. So the latest being this month, and their data goes all the way back to 2008. And I think currently there are about 97 indexes. And Wayback URLs tool actually looks at one index from 2018. So I'm not sure why. I guess that was the latest index when Tom wrote the tool, but it's good to be aware that that's the only index it looks at. Now, it did also mention Virus Total as a source for that. And actually within the code, it says if you set the environment variable VTE_API_key, it does actually get URLs from Virus Total, but I'm pretty sure there's probably about less than 0.1% of people that run Wayback URLs actually know that's there, because if you don't look in the code, you wouldn't know it was there. But that was actually kind of useful for me, because then I was able to add that as a source as well to Waymore. So the main source, obviously, for Wayback URLs is the Wayback archive, Wayback machine, which is web.archive.org, and they have what's called the CDX API. And all Wayback URLs does is use this basic URL with the domain in there, and we'll just get everything for that domain. And you can manually go to this URL on your browser as well with a domain. I think you might have seen Godfather or manually hunting using like going to these URLs in his browser. So one thing to be aware of with Wayback URLs is it just gets everything. It doesn't provide any filters whatsoever. So you will end up with all links that got to 404. So there'll be a lot of really bizarre things, including some strange payloads. Sometimes you'll see. You also get all back CSS, images, videos, lots of things you're really not interested in at all. So I'm just gonna just go to the terminal a second. So if you run help, also there's not really any options for Wayback URLs. There are these two, and to be honest, I've never got them to work, and I probably don't really need them either. And the only option is don't give me subdomains. But to be honest, you're probably never likely to want that anyway. So with Wayback URLs as well, it just makes one request and then waits for all the data to come back. That can be a huge response coming back for big targets. The Wayback API doc actually says for doing large bulk queries, you should use the pagination API, but Wayback URLs doesn't use that. So there can be some issues with it sometimes. I'm just going to run an example. So for Tesla.com, and you can see you wait for a while. Eventually, you start getting lots of stuff come back. So while it's running, I'm just going to then move on to GAU, which I'm sure you've all heard of as well, by Corbin Leo. So it's a bit more advanced than Wayback URLs. It says it gets URLs from Alien Vaults, Open Threat Exchange, Wayback Machine, Common Crawl, and URL Scan. Also, you can see that it's got a lot of options you can pass to filter what you're actually getting back, and also has a verbose mode, which can be useful in most tools. Just to make you aware, it says Common Crawl, but when it gets URLs from Common Crawl, it will just get back URLs from the latest archive, so it would just get back from this one. It doesn't look through any other file, just the latest one. Also, to get URLs back from URL Scan, I think you need to provide the API key. So So when anyone, obviously, everyone probably used GAU before Waymore. Has anyone set up a config file for GAU? Because there's a config file you can set up with a default here to provide API key filters. I never have. I'm sure most other people haven't. And most people don't even look at the help and use any of these filters because it's nice and easy just to do pipe GAU. There you go. Brilliant. I've just got everything I want. But it isn't actually like that. So again, with wayback URLs, if you don't, well, this does have a lot of arguments to filter it, but if you don't pass any of those, then again, you're going to be getting all the 404s, CSS, images, and everything else. So you should always use the filters. And also the verbose output. If you don't use verbose, then actually GAU will just fail silently, and you have no idea if it stopped halfway through the results. Because it can and does fail fairly often with rate limiting. This is probably more extreme these days than it was when GAU was created. So I'm just going to go back to my terminal a minute, and then we'll run. So we'll run Tesla again, but this time we'll use GAU. I put verbose on so you can see that what it goes to the different providers. I think you'll only see one for URL scan. So that failed because you didn't provide an API key, which no one does because they don't read the documentation or put it in the config file.
Is it needless to say that you hate everybody who doesn't actually read the documentation?
I wouldn't say that because guaranteed I don't always read the documentation. It's just one of those natural things. No one does. They just want to jump in and they'll just grab the tool and run it
Grab
and
the
hope for the
tool,
best.
look at the example they provide, and hope that does what we want it to do.
Well, you'll be amazed that there's quite a few people that message me and they haven't even looked at the example. They'll just grab it and just call it and expect it to do something or tell them what to do. And it is odd how many people will pretty much, they'll DM me back and forward with me. They'll take longer to have a conversation back and forward for me to tell them a fraction of what's in the README than they would if they just read the README anyway. But yeah, that's human nature for you. So, okay, wayback URLs ran here. So I'm just gonna, what's the file? So wayback text. So for Tesla.com, got just under 400,000 URLs, which is pretty good. Again, like I said, there's a lot of, you can see a lot of stuff in here like icons, CSS. You'll see, PNGs, that kind of stuff. But so about just under 400,000. The GAU obviously takes a lot longer than wayback URLs, but partly it's because it's using pagination. But that does actually make it better. It will get the results more reliably, but also it's better for the wayback API. And you got to remember as well that Wayback Archive is just like a non-for-profit organization. They don't have, huge IT infrastructure to cope with every bug hunt on the planet running GAU or Waymore in parallel for, trying to throw every target at once. So you do need to be kind to these APIs because they can have problems. And they have been down every now and again in the past few months, I've noticed. And they've improved the rate limiting as well. But I mean, I do have worries that at some point people are going to go too overboard and they'll just end up blocking more and more, and it's going to prevent us from using it, which would be very bad. Still going. think it's partly slower as well because my internet connection where I am at the moment is very bad. But I just want to hopefully, I think there's about 90 pages, so it should be pretty quick. And I'll just grab this. Yeah. I'm actually by the beach at the moment in West Wales. It's nicer than a coffee shop, although I do have coffee. Okay, come on, it's almost done. But yeah, so one thing as well with if you still decide to use Wayback URLs or GAU, but you shouldn't, you should use Waymore. But if you run any of these, don't run multiple instances of these with loads of threads or whatever, because you're just going to end up causing yourself problems and causing the API and therefore everyone else problems. I know it's you know, everyone wants just to get their results as fast as possible and they probably don't care about anyone else getting their results, but it does have a wider effect on people, unfortunately. Okay, GAU should be finished in a minute, but while we're waiting for GAU, I'm just going to switch over to this tab where, so I ran Waymore earlier, again for Tesla. In this example, I'm just getting it's just running the one latest common crawl index, so the same as GAU, just to make it more of a one-for-one. Again, Waymore is a verbose mode, and verbose mode is really useful for pretty much any tool you use, and I would always recommend using that. I'm using mode U because that's just for the URL, so Waymore does more. We'll talk about that later. But so this is basically doing similar to what Wayback URLs and GAU does, so I can just do a more like-for-like comparison. Now it's still going. It's way longer than normal. Okay, so yeah, you do need to provide your API keys, otherwise you'll get annoying messages all the time, which is annoying messages for your own sake, really, because there's no reason not to get them because they are free. So URL scan was rate limited. It might be because I'm running, again, I'm running GAU at the moment. I've only just run Wayback URLs, and now I'm running Waymore. That's probably why I'm getting 429s on URL scan. Well, actually, you can get some URLs without an API key, but you get more if you get a free API key, and you can also get a paid API key where you get a lot more.
I've got a quick question, like regarding API keys,
yep.
like, you know, like some of these, like for example, if somebody had like a big like automation system and is really just like continuously like running through Waymore and stuff, can you feed multiple API keys to it, like to like bypass rate limiting? Is that something you can possibly do in Waymore?
No, you can't at the moment. You can only provide one API key for URL scan and virus total. There is an open GitHub issue. Obviously, a few people have asked to have multiple API keys, and I'm still not 100% sure whether I want to do that or not, because I know, obviously, if you can provide, 20 API keys, then that's a benefit for us. But if everyone starts running Waymore and hammering it with 20 API keys,
yeah,
we're going to cause them a lot of issues, and then it will come back round and cause us a lot of issues. So
that makes sense.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I'm kind of against it, I think. I'm sort of undecided on that. Okay, so actually, GAU's just completed, so I'm just going to... So Wayback URLs was just under 400,000 URLs. GAU has got just under 1.5 million URLs. So obviously a lot more. It's a lot better than Wayback URLs. It gets from the same source as Wayback URLs. So really, if you were just to have to choose between those two, you would only use GAU really, so I'm not really sure why anyone uses Wayback URLs anymore. But again, because I just called it with pipe GAU, no filters or anything else, a lot of that data is again going to be, so you saw a lot of CSS files pop past there, and you get images, etc. So the example with Waymore, I ran it to try and do as close comparison as possible, and this is actually even more than GAU, but this was actually filtering as well. So if I'd have said no filters at all to be even more of a close comparison, it should have got a lot more than GAU. But even with the filters, which you can see when I use verbose mode, you can see what filters are in place. So you're not getting CSS images, videos, audio, all that kind of stuff that you're not really interested in. Even then, it's still got a lot more than GAU did. So hopefully that's start to persuade you to use Waymore rather than those two tools. Let me just check my notes a second. I don't want to be missing anything. So why did I create Waymore in the first place? It was actually, I was watching a Z-Wink video. Not sure what happened to him. Hope he's okay. So before he disappeared off YouTube, there was a video he was using GAU, I think, and then he got one of the URLs, but then he manually visited the archive.org site and then went through, sort of viewed the source of that page and started going through the response, which immediately made me think that's a really good idea, but surely there's some tool that you can download all those responses, but I couldn't find one at the time, so that's why I wrote Waymore. So that's the biggest differentiator really between the other tools, is it has a mode to download all of the archived responses, not just the links that were called to get those responses. So it also made sense to include all the same sources as Wayback URLs and GAU to actually get the URLs too. So that's why there's two modes in Waymore. There's mode U for URLs and mode R for responses. I'm just going to show you a quick, it's a tweet I kind of send out every now and again. Usually if I see anyone doing one-liners and still using Wayback URLs or GAU, I'll usually drop them a link to this tweet to try and persuade them not to do that. Again, it's kind of similar to the examples I showed you earlier where, Waymore can be a bit slower. Well, it can be a lot slower depending on filters you use, but you have more control over what you're getting, and you will get a lot more back and a lot better quality. And Waymore's really a tool that's designed for coverage rather than speed. Okay. Any questions at the moment?
Not really seeing any chat, but if they send
Cool.
them, I'll pass them up to you.
Okay. Right. So let me go to the repo for this. So as you can see, these are the sources, which are basically the combination of Wayback URLs and GAU. Please make sure you get your API key. I'll just keep saying it because people still won't bother, but really it only takes a few seconds and you will see the benefit if you do. I would, again, saying here is it can be slow, but it is meant for coverage, not speed. So I made some changes recently. Previously it used to be a tool, normal Python tool. You had to clone the repo, go in there, run setup, and then you have to use Python waymore.py from that directory. But I've changed all the tools now, so you can install them using pip, which makes it a lot better. You can just say Waymore, and you can call it from anywhere. It's not actually in the, you can't just do pip install Waymore yet, because I haven't had time to look into uploading it to the Pi site or whatever it is that uses that. I'm not trying to do that at the moment, but that probably will be coming soon. You can also install it with Docker, but I'll be honest, this was a pull request by someone else who knew what they were doing. I think I tested it at the time we put it in. I never use it. I've no idea if it still works, so fingers crossed it does. But so if you want to use it with Docker, it's there. If you find out it's broken, please let me know. I'll try and fix it. So when you do install with pip, now there's the config file actually gets written to the standard .config directory. So if we go, so you'll see the config.yaml in here. Also, if you reinstall Waymore using pip, then now it doesn't, because you've got your API keys in your config file, you don't want to be having to keep, you don't want your config file to be overwritten when you run pip again. So it will leave your existing config file, but it will create this config file YAML.new. So you can always look in there and see if there's any changes that need to go in your current config. And normally there's not any major changes that will make a difference. I'm just going to cat the config file so you can see this is the default config. So you got filter code. So like I said, when I ran it earlier, it applies all these default filters, so it won't get any links that ended up resulting in a 404. So you won't get all the there's some really bizarre links that you can see if you just get everything with wayback URLs. And sometimes you'll get, like, you'll see XSS payloads in there and all kind of stuff. So by default, it won't get 404s, 301s, or 302s. It filters out all CSS. It'll filter out by MIME type of the response. That's the MIME type that the archives registered as at the time, not of the response that you get now necessarily. Filter URL. So you will only get, sorry, you won't get, so the MIME type might not be text CSS for some reason. It might come back with a really weird MIME type, or it might come back as unknown, which some of the archive does. So this will make sure that it doesn't get CSS files, images, that kind of thing. This is the default, but you might want to change the default because obviously you might want some WordPress links depending on what you're actually doing. The filter keywords, I should have called that match keywords because it's not filter really, it's actually match. So this is used if you use the -ko keywords only argument, which I'll come back to later. But this will only get links that have these words in the URLs. So that's where you can set some more interesting things. So you'll see later there might be some targets where the amount of data is just ridiculously huge. You can't get everything, so you can use the -ko, which uses this list. So you can get a subset that you're more likely to be interested in. Again, this is where you put your URL scan API and the virus total API key. Continue responses if piped. To remind myself what was that? Oh, so you can call Waymore like I did earlier, where you just say Waymore -I and pass in input there. But you can also cat a file of domains, for example, to Waymore. If you get responses, and if you're running mode R, get responses, and you cancel partway through, well, actually, when you run it again, it will ask if you want to carry on from where you left off. But obviously, if you're piping in the input, it's not going to ask you that because you're not going to have a user interaction at the time. So this just determines what you want to answer that question as. This is called webhook. Because Waymore can take a long time, there's an option if you put your webhook in here, and then there's an argument -nd or notify Discord, and that will just send you a little notification, tell you it's finished, which can be useful if you're running Waymore for days, which some people do. And default output directory, this is a recent change after changing it to be installed with pip. So like I said, the default directory of saving files is, it will actually, before when it was in the Python, in the repo directory, it would be, if you installed it in tools, for example, you'd have Waymore directory, and then in Waymore, if you ran it without specifying any output locations, it would just save a results folder in that directory with a folder for each target. Now, because you don't have a repo directory, it will actually save it in the same directory as the config.yaml file. So you'll end up with .config/waymore/results/tesla.com, for example. If you don't want it to be in there, you can specify a default output directory. So you might just create your own directory called Waymore results, and you can just have everything written there instead. But if this is blank, or if this key isn't in your config file, it will just default back to this one.
Somebody's got a question. So, is there any way to have it default to the directory that you're in? Is there any quick way to do that? Or we just have to specify exactly where we want to put it to.
Trying to think. Yeah, I think you have to specify at the moment, otherwise it will go just to the default directory. I guess I could do a change to do that. I mean, really, it probably helps make people more organized. When I never use default directories anyway. I always have, I don't want to random files anywhere. I always have a folder for, platforms. So BugCrowd, HackerOne, and in there I've got a folder for particular programs, and then in there I've got a folder for different types of output or whatever. So yeah, no. You have to either specify the output with the -OU or -OR, or it will go to your default output directory at the moment. Yeah, I guess you could. Yeah, you probably could use the $PWD. I guess that would work as well. You can give it a try, see what happens. So I'm just reading the question. Currently, there is no default. Currently, there is no default directory when installed, but honestly, should just require the output flag. Yeah, I always use the output flag anyway, but obviously there are people that don't want to use any flags, like GAU. They just want to put GAU and not think about output flags. So it's try and cater for everyone, which is why I get people actually sending me messages saying, well, I still use GAU because it's nice and easy, whereas Waymore is just way too complicated. There's too many arguments, but it's impossible to put defaults in that will work for everyone. So okay, I'm going to go let's have a look at some of the arguments. I'll start near the bottom because there's a few more important ones. So the verbose option, I always use the verbose option, or sometimes there's very verbose on some tools, and I always use that when I start using a tool that I don't know well, because you get a lot more information. You're going to understand what's actually happening, what the different filters are likely to do. So with Waymore, you get, as you saw, you can see, you can double check what config, what the defaults for the arguments are if you didn't pass them, what exclusions it's using, the actual URLs that it calls the API with. That can be handy. You can just cut and paste that URL and then you'll get the results back in your browser. It's the same thing. So I always use the verbose one, and I'd probably recommend other people using that. If you might get more detailed error messages as well, things like that. So there's also another option which was added recently as well, which is a really important one, is this -co check only. And I use that to run, so you can basically have any Waymore command line, but if you put .co on the end, then it effectively is not going to run the command, but will run it and tell you how many requests and how likely it's how long it's going to take, which can be very useful, and I'll show you why now with examples here. So this is just running. So this is just running for Twitter, and it's mode U, so only getting the URLs. We haven't got to the downloading responses, but yet. This is just excluding common crawl, URL scan, alien vault, and virus total. So basically, it's just running for the Wayback Machine. And I'm just putting -co check only at the end, so it will just do a check rather than run it. And you'll see you really don't want to be doing that without the CO, because there are an insane number of archived URLs for Twitter, and you'd actually be running it for way more than a year. So nobody wants to do that, or maybe you do. I don't know. So another example with use Microsoft.com. This is for mode R, which is downloading the responses, not getting the URLs. And the -L0, that's the -L is the limit argument, and saying 0 basically means I just want to get everything. That actually defaults to 5,000. So if you don't provide -L when you download responses, you will only look for 5,000 of them. So you always want to. I always use -L0, but I do use -co first. Check. So it's just got to check. The responses, by the way, when you use -mode R, which is download responses, the only source of that is the Wayback Machine. It doesn't look at common core or anything like that. They just, all the others just provide URLs, not the actual responses. So quite a lot of responses, a lot of requests it's got to make. So there's a lot more responses than that. That's how many requests it's got. I can't remember how many URLs come back in one request or one page, as they call it. So that's going to take more than 7 days. So when you use check only, that is kind of a rough estimate, but it's fairly close. I mean, 7 days obviously is an insanely long time to run a tool, but actually, you know, if you want them, that's how long it takes. You can't really get around that. That's just, you know, if you wrote any tool that would download them without really abusing the Wayback Archive and causing them lots of problems, that's just how long it is going to take. So 7 days, you might think, okay, well that's doable. So then you can just take the -co off and run it. But then obviously you do run it and take 7 days. That's when you want to use this -nd notify Discord. So if you've got the webhook in the config, you provide that, it will tell you roughly after 7 days, it'll let you know exactly when it's finished. So you don't keep going back and checking. So let's go back to the top here. Okay, so the input for Waymore is typically just a domain only. So like in the examples, just -i tesla.com or redbull.com or whatever you want to do. Or it can be a file of domains, which can be useful as well. But please do not pass subdomains unless that is all you really need. Again, this is something I post on Twitter and quite a few times. If you pass subdomains, it will just take so much longer, but you're not getting any benefit from doing that. In fact, you might even miss out on links, because if you pass a file of subdomains and the archives know about a subdomain you haven't passed, then obviously you won't get that data. But passing a domain means you will get everything the archive knows, all the subdomains the archive knows about. So only ever pass a subdomain if you really, that's all the data, you only want that subdomain. I mean, there might be some situations when you want that, but generally not.
Here's a quick
also,
question that I've got, and it may be in your documents. You know, like everybody else, I don't like to read, so I'm just gonna ask the expert. Is there any way? So, I know I've seen you post on Twitter, you know, about hey, don't run, you know, Wayback or Waymore on subdomains. It's useless. Just run it on the main one. But is there any way to just filter out specific subdomains where I can feed it like, hey, I only want information regarding X subdomain to be searched through and pulled through? Is there a way to do that within Waymore?
No, not at the moment.
Okay.
So you basically just get everything as a domain and then grep afterwards. Really. I'm not. Yeah, if you really did only want certain domains and you want to avoid some, then that's a situation where you would pass subdomains. But generally, most people don't want to do that. They pass their subdomains and because they think they've got a list of 1,000 subdomains and they think they've done great recon job finding all these, so I'm going to pass all those to Waymore because I'm going to get stuff back that other people aren't. But it just doesn't work like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And also if you've run Waymore, you've done all your recon, but then later on you find some ultra secret subdomain, there's no point running Waymore again and passing that, because if the archives had known about that already, then you would have got that data back. It's just, it has what it has. It's not going to, because you're providing it something new, it's not going to suddenly have data that it didn't have before, if that makes sense. So you can provide a path as input as well. So, but it won't, if you do provide a path, then it defaults to mode R. So we'll only download the responses that start with that path. It won't run mode U and get all the URLs.
That makes sense.
Just for that path.
There was, because that's really similar to how I was thinking it, because there have definitely been some stuff that we've found in doing the recon for like FIS and T-Mobile where I'm like, well, we're really off in the beaten path and it's kind of dead, and I would really just like to find only information regarding this subdomain to see if there's anything else. I wasn't sure if there was just like a better way to do it.
Nah, not really. Yeah, so I always just basically run Waymore for the Apex domains and just get everything I can, and then grep for stuff later. It's usually the best way of doing it, I think. You can pipe in multiple domains as well. As I mentioned earlier, you can just cat a file of domains, for example, and then pipe to Waymore, and then you don't have to provide -i with the input. You can actually pass just a TLD to Waymore as well. So I can't imagine many people doing this, but it was someone requested this a while back because they wanted to get every single thing that the archive had for AWS, I think. I think I checked the other day that if you wanted to get all the URLs for all .com domains, it would take 850 days or something like that. So if you really want to do that, go for it. If you pass any scheme, port number, query string, or URL fragment, with the domain, it just strips all that out because none of that's needed, and it doesn't really make sense to pass that. You've got the mode, as I mentioned before, it defaults to mode B, which is both URLs and downloading responses, or you can specify just one or the other. So like I said, if you don't pass any output options, it goes to the default output directory from your config, or if that's not there, it goes to here. But pretty much most of the time, I will always pass -ou, which is the file of URLs. So typically similar to what you get back from GAU, way back URLs. And -or, which is actually a directory name. So it will create that directory, and that's where it will store all the response files. When I use it personally, I will have my response directory of Waymore _ fisglobal.com, and I will specify, so that would be -or, and -ou I would set to Waymore _ fisglobal.com/waymore.txt, so that URLs file actually gets written to the same folder containing all the responses as well, so it's all together. You've got -n to not include subdomains. Not really sure why you'd want that, but it's there if you really want it. I don't think I've ever used that. Filter responses only, so that's only for if you're using mode U. That's the same as if you were running like wayback URLs or GAU. If you ran mode B, so you're running URLs and responses, all the default filters that are in the config, it will ignore all of those for mode U. So you'll get all the 404s, CSS images and everything like that, and it will only apply the other things to the responses instead. So if you really, sometimes you might want to get all that rubbish back as well, because you might want to know the paths to all the CS files and images and things like that. That can be useful as well. So there's different situations, different people want to do different things. So hopefully these options cover everything. -fc, so you can that defaults to the 404, 301, 302 in the config. I actually use -fc 404 when calling Waymore for mode U, which is just the URLs, because I'm interested in where the URLs might actually redirect to, because it might redirect to some new Apex domain you weren't aware of, for example, or something like that. And when I use Waymore, I actually run mode U separately to mode R. I never just run it with mode B, which is the default one. Mainly because I sometimes, I'll provide different options. I want different filters for U and R. Also, it puts a little break in between because I'm just worried about rate limiting on Wayback Machine, because they did increase the rate limiting quite badly not that long ago. But Waymore does deal with that now as much as it possibly can. But again, that does slow things down, unfortunately, but it still will get all the data for you eventually. -mc, so that's just matching the code instead of filtering the code. So you can pass -mc 200, for example, if you only want to get everything back that was 200 responses. -l limit, that affects mode R only, so that's how many responses are saved. So like I said when I ran it earlier, when I did the check for Microsoft.com, I passed -l0 because that says I want to get everything, not just, it defaults to 5,000, but generally you're going to want to find everything really. -from and to, these can be useful filters. So for example, if you're running on a huge target, if you're going to run Waymore on Tesla, then there's a lot of URLs that will come back. I'll show you an example here. Actually, here's an example URL from the Web Archives, and this is for Tesla, and this is from 2008. You can see in the folder here, and you will get loads and loads of responses for Tesla. But as you'll see when this loads up, you probably don't want to be getting all these responses for Tesla, because this is from way before Elon sunk his claws in it. So really, it's a good idea if you know, like Tesla, the company you're hacking, rather than the domain that might change hands a few times. If you know they started in, I don't know when they started, if they started in 2015, for example, if you pass dash from 2015, then you'll get a lot more relevant data back, and less rubbish like this, which will just end up confusing things, because you'll end up, you'll probably get links from these and stuff as well, which aren't relevant to the actual bug bounty program at all.
Do we have the ability to say we only want year 2005 or whatever?
I think if you put dash from 2005 dash to 2005, it will just be that year.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure so that didn't fight with each other.
Or it might be dash from 2005 and dash to 2006. I can't remember how that was coded, so I'm not sure. Probably to 2006, I think. Capture interval, so that defaults to D, which is day. So it's not likely that you're going to get a website making more than one change to a file in one day. So that's the default. But if you're really cautious, you might think, well, maybe they did 2 changes in a day, and I'm only going to find out about one of those changes, and I might miss something really. They could have accidentally put all their keys in there and then immediately did a change to take it out, and they would have been, and you might only get one of those back. So you can change that to hour, and it will just get the first capture per hour. It's unlikely there's going to be more than one change within an hour that you'll be interested in, but everyone has different requirements, so you can actually set that to none as well, and it will get everything. But obviously bear in mind then that you are going to get a lot more data back that you're going to have to sift through, and it's going to take longer to get. URL file name. So when you download the responses with mode R, it names the files with a kind of hash value and then the extension of the file. The reason it does that is to try and, if you've got thousands of requests that all end up with the same response, you don't want to be saving 1,000 versions of the same file in your download folder. So it uses a hash of the response content, and then you have the index.txt file that kind of correlates the hash values to what the actual URLs were. If you don't want the hash value and you want to see the actual URL names in the files, then you can set this. But again, if you do that, bear in mind you're going to have a lot of extra files, and a lot of the contents of the files will just be duplicates of each other. So all the X flags are just to exclude a specific source. So LCC, that's to limit common crawl, how many indexes you want to run for. So that defaults to 3. So at the moment, if you just run it without providing -LCC, it will look at these 3 indexes. You can set it to -LCC1. Obviously, that's like then doing the same as what GAU would do, just looking at the latest. Or you can put -LCC0, and that means get everything, and it will search all 97 indexes, which means you could get back more information, Can you see this? Can you see my GitHub page at the moment, or have I?
Yeah, we're looking at GitHub.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, so it can search all 97 indexes, which can be useful, but again, that's going to take a lot longer to go through those. And Common Crawl is really slow. I don't know if you remember looking at when Golden was talking about the Subfinder stats flag the other day. When I was running it, I showed examples, but Common Crawl takes a long time because they've been having a lot of performance issues recently as well. And I did message them about this, and it was a bit of a curt reply, really. And their suggestion was just use the offline version, which is not possible for this application, but they didn't really seem to care too much. So I used to run -lcc0 all the time and just take the hit on the time, but because of the performance issues as well, I usually just use -lcc1 or just leave it as the default of 3 these days. And -lcy, we can specify a year as that is also added, so it's used in conjunction, sorry, with -lcc. I'm not really sure why I didn't use the -from instead of -lcy, actually. I don't know, but I probably would have just used the -from in hindsight. Never mind. -t timeout. That's just how long it waits for archive responses before it gives up. -p, so it's kind of multi-threading in Python, but this defaults to 1, which lots of people probably look at and think, oh, don't like that. I want it as high as possible. Again, I think I actually limit that, so you can't set it higher. I'll see if people want to mess around with the code, they can do, but again, I only set it to -1, and I never change that because if you do run it with more than one process and you're hitting Wayback Machine with more than one process, you're likely to get rate limited more, and probably end up with less data back because it will eventually die and give up trying to get it, or you're going to be causing problems for their API and then again go back in circles and causing everyone problems. Memory threshold. So when you're downloading responses, that will say, sorry, it's not just, sorry, when you're running it full stop, so it, if it's taking days and days, on a low spec VPS, for example, it might end up using more memory. And there's something I actually put in place in XN LinkFinder originally that it will monitor the memory of your machine, and if it gets to the threshold, it will then just stop and give up trying to get anything else, save all your data, and end gracefully before it hits 100% and just dies horribly, and you lose all your data. So you probably don't need to change it from the default. Should be good. Hopefully it shouldn't max out your memory anyway. Keywords only. You use this to reduce the amount of data for responses, not links. This is just used for downloading responses. So like I mentioned in the Microsoft example earlier, where it was going to take 7 days, if I just copy, if I just show the same example. If I show it with the -ko, so it's about 7 days before, but if I just say I only want to get responses with the values, the keyword values in the config file, so it's like admin, cpanel, Jenkins, or anything else you want to put in there, it should reduce the time quite a lot. So it comes back with. There you go. So using -ko keywords reduces it from 7 days, reduces the number of requests to make it a lot more reasonable, and you're getting all the things that you're more interested in. And obviously you can change the those in the config file to anything that you might be interested in. Limit requests. You can use that to limit the number of requests you run for mode U. So again, when we, as an example, we ran it for Twitter, when it said there were however millions of requests. If you say -lr limit request 10, then you'll see that's all it would try and get, only 10 requests. So that can be handy sometimes. Output overwrite. So if you run Waymore and then run it again for the same target, you might do different options or whatever. The output file it writes to, it will just keep appending to that for that specific target. But you might not want that. You might want to just overwrite it and start fresh each time. So if you do want to overwrite it, you just pass -ow. New links file. So you can run Waymore again. So this is just for mode U. If you run Waymore on Twitter, for example, you run that last month. If you run the same thing and you use the -nlf, if you then run it again, the same commands, it will only get URLs back that have been archived since the last time you run it. So this can be useful for continuously monitoring a target, because obviously URLs are going to get archived all the time. So you might want to go back, but you don't want to be running it. You know, if you were stupid enough to run it for the 500 days or something for Twitter before, you think there might have been some new interesting URLs archived in the last week, you don't want to be running for another 500 days, but you can just run it from where it left off and just get new stuff, which will obviously be a lot quicker. Config, if you want to pass a different config file that you've got saved somewhere else, then you can use that option. Wayback rate limit retry and URL scan rate limit retry. You can change these, but I wouldn't. These work. I haven't really had any issues with 429s. I mean, I did have one earlier, but I think it's because I ran Wayback URLs and then GAU and then Waymore again on the same target, so I was hitting them 3 times in a row. So I would just leave those, but you can change them if you want. Okay, so running Waymore then. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the README, as with all the tools. I try and cover everything I could think of. So I know everyone hates reading them, but really, if you do start using a tool and you think this is going to be a useful tool, if you spend the time reading the README, it's probably a superpower, really. You've probably got an advantage over the majority of hackers out there who still just want to run it without looking at any of the filters or extra arguments or anything like that. And obviously, if you read it all, yeah, I am preaching. I'll never stop. If you do read it all and then still have questions or things you don't understand, then obviously you can just DM me anytime on Twitter or Discord or whatever, and I'll try and help. So one tip to remind you of as well is don't run multiple instances of Waymore on the same machine, because you'll just end up having problems, getting rate limited, hurting the APIs, etc. Just want to read this. So when downloading archived responses, this can take a long time and can sometimes be killed by the machine for some reason, or manually killed by the user, because you might be running it for days and think, oh, I need to stop that, or you forgot to put it in screen or tmux or whatever, and you've been trying not to log off your VPS for 3 days because it's still running or something. In the target's result directory, a file called response.tmp is created at the start of the process and contains all the response URLs that will be retrieved. And there will also be a file called continue response.tmp, that stores the index of the last response retrieved. So if Waymore is run to get responses, if it's in mode R or B, and those files exist, it means that a previous run was incomplete. But when you run it again for the same thing, you will actually be asked if you want to continue from where you left off. So, if you are running it for 3 days and it's only 50% through and you think, oh, it crashed for some reason or your VPS crashed or whatever, when you go to run it again, it will say it got up to here, it was 50%. Do you want to start from here again? So you can choose yes or no. It'll ask you on the screen. So for just do an example here. So just running, getting responses for Tesla. So I didn't provide any, I didn't provide the -L to say like get everything or whatever. So it defaults to 5,000, but that 5,000 that's the limit that's put in the request to the API, but that can end up going down based on filters as well that you pass to the API.
Here's a question from chat, which is a good question. He said he doesn't understand the point of having 10,000 plus links. What do you do with this way more data? How do you take your next step with it?
That's a good question, and I'll come to that later in a post-processing section later. So I'll tell you all the things I do, or things you could do. So we'll get to that later. So this example is running. It's getting downloading responses at the moment for Tesla, and it'll show you the percentage. Gradually get up to 100%. Say I had to kill it now, so it only processed 17. So if I run it again, so it says the previous run, it's do you want to start from 17? So you're not going to lose all of the work you did before, which can be handy, if everything goes wrong when you're like 99%, you don't want to be waiting hours or days again. And you can say yes. If you say yes, it'll start from 17. If you say no, it'll just start from scratch, which you might want to do for some reason. I'll cancel that. Just checking my notes. So I'm just going to go to, because I didn't provide the -O, the output for the results, the -OR flag, then it's going to be written to the default directory, which currently falls back to this because I don't have that set in the config. So I'm going to, so these were the files that it managed to create. So it's like because I cancelled it, there's not many response files in here, but you can see the continuous response and response.tmp files. Those are to do with making sure you can run it again. So I'm just going to, so the index.txt file is an important file. If you use that -URL file names file argument I mentioned before, you won't see this. But by default, it will create files with a hash value. And if you do that, you will get the index.txt file. And this basically shows you the hash for the file name and then what the actual URL is for that hash. So you can actually, you can get the archive URLs and you can visit those directly in the browser. So for that download response, you can look in the index file, say ask for this URL, and this is the request, and you can see the source and everything for that. But the source for that will be in this downloaded file. They're within the responses as well. If you actually look on the archive.org website, it obviously includes a lot of its own code within that for the archive.org headers, and there'll be their own JavaScript and stuff like that. But Waymore will strip all that out. So the files you end up downloading should just be you shouldn't see any Wayback Archive stuff in there. It should just be stuff relating to your target. So you won't go, like if you try and find links from the files or something, you won't get archive.org stuff. So yeah, so it's the hash values. I'm just going to sort. Are there any the same? There's none of the same in this example, but you might. So for example, if you might see the same hash value appear with a number of URLs because they all had the same response, and that hash value, like I said before, is the hash of the actual response. So you don't want 1,000 files that all have the same content. So that's the reason for having this hash value for the file names and having the index file to kind of correlate those, because you'll save a lot of space and you have a lot less to look through. And an example actually of where you might have a lot of files, a lot of different URLs as well, but corresponding to the same hash and same downloaded file, is they might all be going to the same custom 404 page. So you might see loads of different URLs, all kind of things, but they all end up going back to the same content. And it might be, sorry, there's nothing here. I am planning on doing a change soon to deal better with custom 404 pages. So it will, if you do have the filtering 404 status code, then it will also try and filter out custom 404 pages based on, initially I'm just going to base it on the HTML title having things like 404 or page not found, a few common strings in there, so we'll cut those out as well. Scroll back up here, something I want to mention. So when you run it with verbose mode, another thing you get that comes out are, these are the MIME types of results that did actually get sent through. So you might see MIME types in here. That's an interesting one I haven't seen before. There's some weird stuff that comes in every now and again. Like, you might think, well, I don't want to download responses ever of these MIME types, sorry. And that one I'd probably look up. So if it is just a normal image that you're not going to care about, then this is a good list to look at, because you might want to add that to your config file for the MIME exclusions, so you don't get it in future. And I guess that's another one actually that should be added to the default config. Sometimes I'll come across them, and again, that's another one. There's so many random content types, you can't really, I can't put them all in the default, but if I do come across some and I know for sure it's generally not something we want, I'll add it to the default. But you can also do the same. So let's get to my own use of Waymore. So like I said before, I personally run it with mode U and mode R separately, because I'm worried about rate limiting a bit, and I can provide different options. So for example, I use the -FC404 for mode U, and I use the default 404, 301, and 302 for mode R. I always use -L0, so the limits, to get all downloaded responses, but I do check with the -CO first, the check only. And if it's way too big, I then usually run the same thing, but with -KO, which is the keywords only. Run that instead. And I used to use -LCC0, which was all 97 common core indexes, but like I said, they have way too many problems, so I'll normally stick to the default of the previous 3 indexes. And I also always specify the target responses and -ou with the path, the same directory as -or, but the name waymore.txt. So I'll just post these in the chat. Can everyone still hear me?
You're cutting out a little bit, but you're good.
Oh yeah, sorry, that just took a while to post. I suddenly thought my internet connection had died in. Apologies if it does go in and out. So that's really, that's my default way I call Waymore these days. I'll have target variables set before, so like tmobile.com. I generally have a script that will go through and do various processing and then post-processing. So talking of post-processing, so when I have run Waymore and then I've got all this data, so what do I do with it? One quick win I do is call Trufflehog, because I think generally that's the best tool out there for checking for secrets and API keys, etc. And they have a file system mode. So it's taking ages to send messages. There you go. So that's the command I generally run after, which will run. So this is the Waymore underscore target. That's the name of the response directory, and I'll just run Trufflehug over that, and you can specify to filter out unverified. So if there's anything, it tries to verify API keys as well, but it's always just a quick thing to run in the background after you run Waymore, because you never know. You can always use notify to alert you if it did find anything in there. Obviously, there's a lot of response files, and I always end up I'll grep those for interesting content. So I'll grep things like GraphQL queries or database select or insert into statements, AJAX requests, HTTP requests, etc. There's a lot of things that you'll want to look for, typically in the JS files, but obviously there's obviously a lot of inline JS files, inline JS in the HTML files, etc. And you can end up with all kind of interesting response files, not just HTML and JavaScript. With the actual links you get back from mode U, then obviously those links are going to have a lot of interesting information in them by themselves, with parameters and different, there might be interesting IDs that could be useful when you start hacking and you want to try and find other IDs or other like UUIDs for trying to do IDORs or whatever. And I'll get to that in a minute with running XN LinkFinder as post-processing for Waymore. But one thing that's obviously useful for the links file, because these are archived links, a lot of these may not work anymore. So you probably want to pass those through HTTPX to make sure you've got ones that are still alive. And I'll always use URL less tool as well. That's another one of my tools. It was based on SomDev's URO, but with a few extra features. So it kind of helps reduce a huge file of URLs to something that's a bit more workable. So anything with parameters, it will keep, but will reduce the number of well, if you read the README to URL, it's hard to explain, but it does a number of things to reduce it, and you can also provide your own regex to reduce certain things. You can get rid of content you're not interested in, like blogs and career stuff or anything like that. And generally with that list, I'll often kind of take some of those as well, maybe pick links out that have parameters, for example, and pass to my Nox NL tool, which uses the Nox SS, just to see if there's any easy XSS, just to have that running in the background while I'm doing other things. Anything for quick wins, really. So obviously there's a lot of downloaded files that you could look through, and you can end up with, I think I'm running on T-Mobile at the moment, or t-mobile.com, and I think it's about 70% through, and there's over 20,000 files already. So manually going through those is not really practical, but there's a lot of inline JS in those HTML files. So I actually have a Python script I run myself that goes through all the downloaded files, actually not necessarily, doesn't look specifically for HTML, but we'll just go through everything and anything within, if there's inline JavaScript within script tags, it will extract those, it will get all the unique scripts, and I write them to one or more combined JS files. I'll show you an example of that. So I have a script that does this. So this is an example on, tmus.net. So if you've got thousands of HTML files, you don't really want to be going through those trying to find the different inline JavaScript. So this was useful to me to just throw all the JavaScript into one file, and then I can almost just scroll through it as if it was just one JavaScript file. So it has a break for each section. So this is separate JavaScript block, and also it shows the index.txt line. So obviously it could have the same, if it has the same JavaScript block and that appeared in 20 different files, you'd see 20 different comments up here to show you what files that JS was found in. But I find that quite useful, right? Because I use this Simply Code Beautify Chrome extension, which makes it look really nice as well. So that's been really useful. It's it's a separate script I run, but it's something I'm thinking about adding as an output option in Waymore if anybody would be interested in that. It's probably a future change I'll do. I'm not sure if people would want that. I don't know. I was thinking some people might be like, why are you doing that? But yeah, I find it useful. So I might add that. So the last post-processing thing I'll come to, which is the biggest thing really, is using XN LinkFinder. So this talk was going to be for Waymore and XN LinkFinder, but XN LinkFinder has a specific usage for Waymore results. So I'll talk about that specifically first, and then I'll go back to talking about the rest of LinkFinder afterwards. So before I go on to the LinkFinder part, is there any big questions? Do I have any success with Nox SS? I haven't used it massively yet. I'm trying to use it more. I did, when I started trying to use it more recently, I did actually get an XSS. It turned out to be it was for FIS Global, and I just decided, well, I was just testing it out really and throwing it. It was using a file that I'd had from Waymore that I'd run over HTTPX, run over URLs, and then sent it to Nox SS, and then I got a nice little Discord alert with the POC that came through, and it worked. And actually it was quite a clever XSS as well that it found, because I'm not really sure how it does this, but it was a reflected XSS, and the parameter was a base 64 encoded string. So I don't really know how it figured out how to do that, but it did, and it worked, and it turned out to be out of scope, unfortunately. But I will start using Nox SS more, or Nox NL to use Nox SS. I know he's been doing a lot of big changes as well, and there are some really interesting things he's planning on doing, which I can't tell anyone about yet, but it's going to be good. He's unfortunately with any tool as well, it gets people suddenly signing up because they think it's quick free cash and then really misusing it. So he's struggling with misuse of the API at the moment. And there were a few little performance issues, but he is staying on top of it quite well. And most of those should be sorted soon. So yeah, I think I will have more success with NoxSS the more I use it. And if you do use NoxSS and NoxNL, which makes it easier using the NoxSS API, I would say, well, one of the biggest things is to curate the list of URLs you're sending to that. Don't just blindly send millions and millions of URLs because you're just wasting your time and you're just grinding down his servers for utterly pointless endpoints. Anyway, back to XN LinkFinder. So XN LinkFinder initially, well, it is really it's a crawler, or a dumb crawler, as Jason put it in the course, because it's a dumb crawler because it can be blocked easily. It doesn't use headless browser or anything. It does have a few other modes as well. One of those is the processing of Waymore data, and you can pass the Waymore response directory as the input value to XN LinkFinder, and it will specifically recognize it as being a Waymore folder and do some specific things that it wouldn't normally do with a normal directory, if that makes sense. So calling it for the Waymore folder, basically pass the directory with the -i. Yeah, I mean, well, so XN LinkFinder and GAP are kind of the same tool. It all has the same logic in and does the same regex processing and everything to get the links, the parameters, the word list, etc. It's just doing it for different purposes, really. So calling on the Waymore data, the idea is you are getting more links, but links out of the downloaded responses themselves rather than just the links that the archive knows about. And you're also getting potential words for custom word lists for fuzzing, etc. So as XN LinkFinder is a crawler, it has, I'll go through the arguments properly when we go to talk about it as in the normal tool, but just talking about Waymore use at the moment, I'll just skip to certain arguments. The depth, because it's a crawler, what the depth means is, I think it defaults to depth 1, which just means if you pass Tesla.com to XN LinkFinder, it will request that and then grab all the links from the response of Tesla.com. If you passed the depth of 2, it means it will first go to Tesla.com, get all the links from there, but then we'll do another depth round, which will then try and request all the links it found in that response, and then get all the links from those responses. So when I call it for Waymore data, generally I don't want it to try and request all the links, because a lot of this is, because it's archived data, a lot of this will just fail anyway. So I always use -d0 to make sure it doesn't try and request anything at all. It will just get the links from the downloaded responses, and that's it. It's not going to try and crawl anything. Also, make sure as well, when you use it for Waymore, well, when you use it anytime for anything actually, but especially with Waymore, you want to specify all the 4 different output files So you want to specify a location, mainly because it helps you be a bit more organized. You're naming it probably, you can find it later. But there's an output file for the links, which is just -o for potential parameters for the word list. But also this new one, at the moment, it doesn't output this by default. You actually have to pass -output out of scope, otherwise you won't get the file generated. And this has actually been quite useful recently with FIS and T-Mobile. So anything, we'll get to it a bit more detail, but you have a scope filter when you call this, and it's the same with other tools like Katana or whatever. You say this is the domain I'm interested in. So because you don't, if you're passing a depth of 10 or something, you don't want to be suddenly going rogue and crawling Twitter and Facebook and everything, because you have to pass a filter to say I'm only interested in tmobile.com. So don't go requesting any other domains. So because you're specifying a scope prefix, any links that it does find on the way, if they're not in scope, it will output it to this out of scope file. Previously, it was just ignoring those, but this is an option I added recently because I found that there's a lot of really useful information here. You can find a lot of subdomains of Apexes you already know, but also with FIS Global and T-Mobile, I found Apex domains in there that I didn't know about at all. So actually, I'll show you an example of this. I'm just going to log on to my VPS where I've got my T-Mobile data. Give me a second. So I'm just going to show you this. This is an example of the Waymore command that I ran for tmobilefiber.com, for example. So we're passing the domain, mode U just for the links, new line file. So if I did run it later, I can only get the I'll only get the new archived links. I'm only interested in filtering 404s. I'm only looking at the latest common crawl index, and I'm outputting the file to this folder, waymore.txt. So that's the command I ran. So, and also, like I said, I always run mode U and mode R separately. So, and this is the command I ran to get the downloaded response for mobile fiber. So again, you can see it's the same folder where I stored the URLs as well. And -L, if you remember it, the limit 0 just means get everything I possibly can. So if I go into that directory and list my files, if I cat one of these, so there's an example of the files it got back. There's quite a lot in there. Actually, I wonder how many. Sorry, just see how many files there were. It's quite a small target for T-Mobile. It's one of the smaller domains. So with 599 downloaded, well, a few less because of these files as well. So I'm just going to run XN LinkFinder over this particular domain as an example. So this is what I would run. XN LinkFinder, I'd pass the download response directory. Then I'd specify my output files for links, parameters, words, and out of scope. Then I'd pass a scope prefix. So when you run XN LinkFinder, if it finds, it might just find a path of /API/users. You can use, you might want to prefix that. You certainly do if you're using XN LinkFinder normally as a crawler. If you want to re-request URLs all the time, it's not going to know what to do with /API/users. You need to have obviously a domain in front of it. So this is specifying what you put in front of those paths or file names you find for it to be able to try and request them later. And SF, a scope filter. So this is saying we're only interested in these. And that means anything that doesn't have the t-mobilefiber.com will go into this out of scope text file. And like I said, D/D0 because I don't want to crawl any of these. And I'm just going to add the dash prefix just to show you what that does in a second. So do you share the code for your bug bounty XML program that what platform? No, I don't. Hang on a second. So this whole menu system on my VPS and will show me nice stuff, whatever. That was something I did right at when I started learning my bug hunting and everything. Obviously, everyone says you need to learn Bash. I'd never used Bash before, so I actually kind of created this whole system to be more organized for hunting, but used it as an exercise to learn Bash better, really. Because if you want to learn a programming language like Bash, Python, or anything like that, the best way of learning it is to actually have a purpose. It's pointless just doing a course and doing all the exercises that don't have a purpose for yourself. If you like, I need to do this, I need it to display this or whatever, you just keep going and Googling until you're able to do it. Well, now you don't have to, but you can just ask ChatGPT and it'll probably just do it for you in about 5 seconds anyway. So, but yeah, it's just an easy way of keeping everything organized on my VPS, really. So back to the XN LinkFinder. This is the command I would use. So I'll just run that, and you'll see so it recognizes that I'm running over a Waymore results directory. So it's running in Waymore mode. There's 594 files, so it knows to exclude the index.txt file, the continue.tmp file, for example. So it's just going through the archived responses and analyzing all those and trying to find links, potential parameters, and generate custom word list. So just give that a second to finish. Almost there. Okay, so that's finished. So obviously you get the URLs from the archives, like Wayback URLs and GAU, etc. But this has found over 2,500 links within the responses themselves. You've got a nice word list, and it's found a lot of potential parameters as well. So if we, what was it, links? So these are the links that it found within the responses themselves. So you've got, these JavaScript files were found directly in there as full links. I added that dash prefixed parameter so you can see which ones were actually prefixed with the SP value. So the dash SP was this, and within one of the responses, it obviously found this, so it was prefixed it before putting into the output file. So there's a lot of interesting things it found in there. You could use FUF, for example, to send all those URLs in the output file to burp if you use the FUF-replay-proxy argument. That's one idea. You could also send this links.txt file. You might want to, obviously, without if you if I don't use the dash prefixed argument, then it wouldn't have the bracket prefix bracket in there. So then you could just send the links file as input directly to XN LinkFinder again, and actually try and crawl all those if you wanted to try that. Just gonna have a look at the params. Can't type. So there's a file then of all potential parameters that it found. There's a lot of different ways and places it finds potential parameters, and you can change that within some of the options we'll get to later. It doesn't. No, it doesn't actually show sus params at the moment. That's a change that's on the to-do list to do them basically similar to GAP. So it'll probably output a separate file called sus params and just have them all in there in a similar output it shows in GAP. So yeah, that will come eventually. Show you the words file. Really can't type. So the words as well. There's a lot of different options for these, but it's a. I think the word generation in GAP and XN LinkFinder is a lot better than you get things like cool or cool, however you pronounce it, because it does do a number of different things. Like it will intelligently try and, so for example here, I mean it's not a good example, but if it finds the word happy, it'll then give you a plural with IES and things. There's a lot of better examples than that. Yeah, there's a lot of. It's just a good custom word list that you can use for fuzzing, content discovery, subdomain brute forcing later on or something. Obviously, you can use Cool as well, but this is obviously an extra benefit from running XN LinkFinder to call the links. You may as well get the words and parameters out while you're doing it. So this is the out of scope links. So anything that doesn't satisfy the scope prefix you pass to XN LinkFinder will be written to this out of scope file. And the first thing I do is obviously use tomnomnom's unfurl. So straight away, so we're calling this for, we're looking at T-Mobile, and straight away there's a domain, an Apex domain, and I don't think this is in the Apex domains list that was shared on the channel. So, this file of like throwaway links really, it can actually be really useful. And also with when I was looking at FIS Global, there were a number of, I sort of went through, obviously you can ignore stuff like Sentry and npm JS and everything, but there were some domains, not really sure what that is, check who is, and it turned out to be another FIS Apex domain that I wasn't aware of before. So that's another good source. So that's it for Waymore, really. So before I get on to just talking about XN LinkFinder, just from general use, not as Waymore post-processing, are there any questions at all about Waymore or anything I talked about up to now? So if you only get the links with Waymore, it won't hit it. No, it's all completely passive. All you're doing is hitting the APIs of the Wayback Machine, archive.org, Common Crawl, Euroscan, Alien Vault, and Virus Total. You don't hit the targets at all. It's all passive recon. The responses, that's the only source for the download responses is archive.org. You're just getting that, and it's the same as, you know, if you went manually to archive.org, you can, you know, when you view the source on one of the pages they've archived, it's just basically just downloading all of those. So there was no one's archiving cooking. I don't know if the headers are included in the response. I'm not sure. I don't think they are. Oh my god. Jeez. I'm just looking here. Yeah, no, I don't. I really can't say. Yeah, I don't think there's any headers. It is just the actual response. I don't think you can get that from the archives, as far as I'm aware. There are other ways to discover these, not really archives. Yeah, the cookie and the header values, I mean, something I started doing as well. When I run all the Waymore data, I will actually try and get new subdomains from the data, like all the data. Once I get all the links, I'll then do unfurl domains on the actual links file as well, because there might be new subdomains I don't know from there. And when I've got all these subdomains, I always run it through HTTPX with various ports as well, but also a number of the flags like server, tech, title, and then I'll actually, you can, with HTTPX as well, when I do that, there's something I started literally doing today. There is an option in let me check. There's an option in HTTPX to, SR, store the response. So when you're going through running HTTPX anyway, it is getting the response to be to work out a lot of these things. So you may as well store it, and that stores all the headers and everything as well. So that can be useful data as well, because you can see, you know, certain headers they're using. You can see the, you know, the tech or whatever as well. You can. It's always worth, you know, looking at all the subs you've got, and then say, well, there's, you know, all these using Nginx, but there's one that's different. Why is that different? Or there's a cPanel here or something like that. Doesn't. Oh, right. Okay. A lot of bypasses. Okay. Yeah, I try. I mean, again, there's probably a lot of people use HTTPX and just ever run pipe HTTPX, maybe say, you know, 80804443 or whatever, but then don't actually read the help and see all the potential things you can do with it. And most people never will, because they don't want to take the 10 minutes to read through the help. But you can, you know, you might go through that and think, oh, hang on a minute, that's amazing. I needed that. I'm going to start doing that, and then I can get more information from that and pass it to this. And you can do so much more with your data, and understanding your tools to get that data and more relevant data as well is probably one of the most important things. Not just getting more data, but it's actually getting relevant data, which a lot of the tools can do if you look at the help. I assume that's it for the questions. Yeah, that's true. So if there's no more questions about Waymore, I'll go back to LinkFinder. So as I said, LinkFinder is a dumb crawler. One good use I have used XN LinkFinder before is to just do start looking at a new target, going through the scope, and I'll just run XN LinkFinder to do initial crawl of the target website and get links, the parameters, words, and use that as a kind of starter point. So like I said, it has the same functionality as GAP. There are other crawlers as well, but they don't give you the potential parameters and word lists and outer scope list either. So those can be a benefit to other crawlers. So the input to XN LinkFinder, you can just pass a domain or a URL, or you can pass a file of domains or URLs, and it will just process all of them and one by one. You can pass a directory on your system that contains files, so like the Waymore response folder, but that's treated sort of differently. But for example, if you had another tool that just downloaded all the current JS files for your target, you can pass that as the input to XN LinkFinder, and again, it will find all the links for you, but also words and parameters, etc. Another use for XN LinkFinder is you can actually pass a burp project and also Zap or Kaido project. So there's one situation I had where I had a burp project that was insanely big and I couldn't actually do anything with it. I really wanted to run GAP, but just because of the resources burp was using, I know it's a shock, burp uses a lot of resources, but I couldn't run GAP at all. It just would not finish. It's just grind my PC to a halt. So I changed XN LinkFinder to accept a burp XML file. So you can, there's instructions on the README, but basically you can go into burp, you can select all the targets in your sitemap or ones you want, right click, you save the selected items, you untick the base 64 encoding, and you save that locally, and then you just pass that file as input to XN LinkFinder, and it'll do exactly the same as GAP, but we'll actually manage to chug through like a 20 gig file or something, and you'll get all the output. It'll eventually get there. So I'm just gonna. So yeah, I talked about the depth earlier. The inputs went through all the output files. So scope prefix, that's the one. So you have to, like I said, you need to be able, if you want to use it as a crawler and keep requesting new links it finds, you need to give it a prefix. But that prefix, like in the example before, I just used the domain I was looking at as the prefix, but you can actually pass a file of domains or subdomains as well. So, for example, if I was looking at tmobile.com, but I know there's an api.tmobile.com and careers.tmobile.com, yeah, just did that work? So someone requested to speak then, and I clicked on the invite to speak, and then it just disappeared. I'm not sure that worked or just.
They're not up here right now. I think I'm the only one who can give people perms to get up here.
Oh, okay. Oh, I clicked and it disappeared. Okay, so
re-request it.
Yeah.
And I can invite you up.
Yeah, I'll avoid clicking. I'll carry on where I left off anyway, and yeah, if anyone wants to, yeah, if anyone wants to ask any questions, yeah, feel free to jump in the chat as well, or just type them out. So yeah, you can pass a file of scope prefixes as well. So yeah, so if I knew there was the www, but also api.tmobile.com and careers .tmobile.com, if it's crawling and it finds a /API/users, you don't know from whether it might be on the www one, it might be on the careers, it might be related to careers one, it might be on the API, it could be on all of them. So if you pass all the prefixes, it will just then in the output you will have /API/users, but it will be prefixed with all the lines from the scope prefix file. And then basically if you've got the depth set higher, it will then try and request all those. So you've got more of a shot of one of them actually succeeding and then carrying on to get more links, etc. Oh, yeah, so and if it is then requesting the api.tmobile.com/API blah, 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 or the careers.tmobile.com/blah, blah, blah, because you don't know which one's right. If some of them do fail with a 404, if the depth is higher than that, then it won't actually save the 404s. So if you've got the depth higher, then in the output you will end up with api.tmobile.com/API/users, but you won't have the other two because they failed with a 404 initially. The only way you do end up with some of the 404s in there, because if it's the last depth run, obviously it's not going to request those URLs, so it's not going to know if it was a 404 or not, so they will be in the output. That's just something to bear in mind. So that behavior of not including the 404s, you can change that with this argument, scope prefix keep failed, if you really wanted. I'm not sure why you would, but there you go. Scope prefix, I'll skip one as well. The scope prefix original. So if you pass this and it found /API/users in the output file, you would also just have /API/users as one line, and then the prefix /API/users as separate lines as well. Scope filter, that's what we covered before. Again, that can actually be a file of scope filters as well. So, when I am running on T-Mobile, if I was running it properly, I'm not really just interested if it is tmobile.com. I've got a list of all other Apex domains, so I want to know if there are any others in there as well. So I'd probably pass a file to scope filter because all of those are in scope, obviously. Cookies and headers. So I'm just looking at the chat quickly. Okay. Get to the back of the class.
I'm just whoring myself out right now.
Okay, fair enough. I heard those rumors. Okay, thanks, Mark. Thank you very much. Yeah, it'll all be recorded, so you can catch up with this anytime. Oh, I was able to get the documentation wheel to work. Well, if you want to do a pull request to fix any Docker issues, that would be great, because I really don't have a clue when it comes to that. So cookies and headers, it's obviously a good idea if you first get authentication on the target you're looking at, so you can pass any auth cookies and headers to a crawler as well, because you're obviously going to hit, sorry, I'm saying obviously way too many times, but you'll hit a lot more endpoints. It's going to get a lot further, find more interesting things. So if you can, always pass cookies and headers to any crawler, really, not just XN LinkFinder. Regex after, that's a match, not a filter. So you can just output, if you say a regex after and then pass API, then in the output you'll only get links that have API in there. But to be honest, you wouldn't really want to use that. You're better off just getting everything and then using grep afterwards. Then we'll talk about processes. Yes, the kind of basic multi-threading-ish thing of Python, so you can change that if you want. Exclude, so you can exclude links from the output. We'll look at the config in a minute. The origin, so for those that have used GAP, when you can click a button and it will show you the link to the right in square brackets of where that link was actually found. So that's the same processing as that. Prefix, that's what I showed earlier. So you do need to know for any reason which links were prefixed and which ones were original links, full links that were found. Then you can use that. Exclude relative links. Some links found start with / or .. and those relative links can be excluded with that argument if you want them to be. I never do. I always leave them in there. Dash include, so if you do pass a huge list of URLs as input, if you pass dash include, it will just include the input URLs in the output as well, just in case, if you want that. So user agent, this is, I'm not sure if this is something I've seen in other crawling tools, but this can be used because you'll use it when there's potentially other endpoints for other types of user agents. So I got this actually from, as an example, Zishono put on his Barker website, where you can find, sorry to spoil it for anyone if you are on Barker, but if you use a mobile user agent, suddenly you see other endpoints that are mobile specific that you wouldn't have seen before. So with this option, you can specify, it defaults to desktop, but you can say, I want to do desktop and mobile, and that will crawl completely with going through it's got a whole set of user agents, so it does cycle through them as well to help with any rate limiting or anything like that. It'll go through all the desktop ones and then it'll start from scratch again with mobile ones. If you want specific mobile, there are also only Apple ones, Android, Windows. You want to say those, they're just subsets of mobile. So if you say mobile, it'll just randomly go through all these. There is actually set-top boxes and game console for really niche crawling. If that might be relevant somewhere, I don't know, but it's in there if you need it. Insecure, so yeah, you can, that's the Python request, you can specify not to do TLS checks. So you can decide when to stop as well on certain things like 429, 403, request timeouts, connection errors. If you want to, that can be handy sometimes. Memory threshold, that's the same thing as I mentioned in Waymore. So if it gets above the default, if it gets above 95%, it's not going to wait till it gets to 100 and then just die horribly and you get to lose all your data. It will actually clean up nicely and save what you did have. Max file size. So if you're passing a directory, so this kind of applies to the Waymore directory as well, but also other directories, you can specify a max file size, because if you happen to have a directory of files you want to look at, but also there's some .ms file in there or some massive thing, you don't suddenly XN LinkFinder trying to crawl the raw version of that file, because you probably will reach the memory threshold if you do that. So this is just to help exclude certain files based on the size. Replay proxy, if you want to, anything that is crawling and going through, if you want to throw that out to burp, for example, just to say dash RP and then HTTP ://127.001.8080, whatever. Max time limit. So again, if you run an XN LinkFinder and you set a really high depth and you just want to be crawling, getting as much as you can, you don't want it you'll probably have a limit where you think, okay, it's been running for 3 days. I just want to stop it now, but you can specify a limit, which can be handy, and it will just close down nicely and just stop wherever it got to after that time limit. Then we've got a lot of options relating to the word list generation. So there's generally the defaults are what you want to keep, but you can look through these and change things if you want. So you can say, I don't want to have plurals or singular versions of words generated, or for example, this one, parameters found wouldn't be included in the word list, but they can be if you pass this. So it's similar to options in GAP verb extension if you've used that. And you can set the maximum word length, for example. So I think it defaults to no limit, but sometimes you can look through your word list and somehow it's just managed to get some word that's some massive, strange blob of characters. You might want to set that really. You're not going to be interested in words that are over 50 characters, for example. The stop file words, I shall get to that when we look at the config, but again, that's just, you probably just want to leave it at the default. It's unlikely you're going to want to add anything to that. So when I said you could pass a burp file, the burp XML file can be quite large, and there's going to be a lot of tags in there that aren't relevant. You just don't need them for this purpose. So you can actually, it will actually ask you if you want to remove useless tags from the file, which you usually want to do, but that will permanently change the file. So, but normally if you're saving the file, you're probably doing it because you want to run it through this, so it's not an issue. But you can say, you can pass this to say, I want to always answer true or false. So if you're automating it or something, you don't want to be running in a script and then suddenly stopping asking if you want to strip tags from a file. Okay, so just kind of a quick look at the default config file. We'll just go back to, just get back to this one. Okay, I'm just using grep on here just to highlight, make it a bit easier to see with. So again, it's a similar thing to Waymore really. So it will exclude any links with these strings in there. It will get, when it requests a file, it will look at the content type of the response and it will exclude anything in here. Sometimes it can't determine the content type, but so this is a catch-all. So if the extension, you've got something blah 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 .jpg, you'll know that that's a JPG file, regardless of MIME type or whatever. So you can exclude those. The regex files. So if XN LinkFinder will look for links, but it will also, you might just have a file name in there. So you might have config.txt or something without any kind of path or anything like that. So you obviously want to get those as well. But obviously, if you have something in double quotes that's just a string dot a string, it could be anything. It doesn't mean it's a file name. So it will only assume it's a file name based on this file list. So if you have quotes foobar.foo double quotes, it's not going to return that. But if you had foo in this list, then that would return it as a file, and then add a scope prefix, try and request it, etc. So I'm just going to run this example on fisglobal.com. And this is a horrible example, but it's a useful example just to show you something that can happen. And that's right, okay. and I've run it on my local machine. So, okay, it found those results. That's not what I was expecting to happen, because I was going to run it for my VPS and show this. So this is a good thing to notice. Again, it's a dumb crawler, as Jason refers to them. So it's clear FIS Global are actually probably blocking my VPS or blocking crawlers. I assume Katana would work because it's headless. I'm not sure. But there's something to bear in mind. Some domains you'll run it and you'll get nothing back. But I ran it on my local machine and I did get links back. So if it doesn't work, try running it somewhere else, running for VPS or VPN even, whatever. So I'll just run this. So you might, if you obviously run this and it just gets nothing back, you might think, oh, hang on a minute, what's that about? But running with verbose, you can see you get a 403 response. So always use verbose on any tools you're using, because it does make life so much easier. You get to learn a lot more about the tool, makes things make more sense. Right, actually, I'll just run this example. I'm going to use the very verbose option on this one. So this is just running LinkFinder on. I'm going to crawl tmobile.com. I'm saying I'm only interested in the links of tmobile.com. I'm overwriting any output. So if these files exist already, basically anything in there is going to be overwritten. And I'm putting the links, parameters, words, and out of scope. So I'll just run this as an example. So with the very verbose, you get to see all the parameters that you've passed, or ones you haven't passed, but what the default values are, which can be useful, the config settings, etc. Again, like Waymore, it will actually show you content types that it has output, because you might see content types in here that you might then want to add into the content type exclusions in the config file for future use. So I'm going to cat the links file. So you can see on that example, I didn't provide a scope prefix. So it found a lot of links in here, but they're all paths, there's no domains on there. So if I ran it with a depth of 2 or something, it's not going to get very far, because it couldn't actually request any of these. So that's why you have to provide a scope prefix. So if I just run it again and then do scope prefix and then HTTP this, and run that. So then if I cat the output file now, you'll see everything has got this prefix I gave it. Actually, I'll run it again, and this time I'll actually give it depth, and I'll give it a depth of 2. So previously, I think it was about 106. I think it was about 106 links. So I'll run it with depth 2, and because I've got very verbose, you actually see what's happening. So it requests that first, it's got all the response. Now it's doing depth 2, and all the links that it got from that, it's now requesting as well. And you can see that which ones are prefix, which ones aren't. So it will then be getting more links and more parameters and words from the responses of these links as well. Okay, any questions while this is finishing? Okay, so 408. Never seen a 408 before. So obviously you won't, well, you will actually, sometimes there can be interesting links in the responses of other things, not just 200. So it will still pick up links and potential parameters from those responses as well. Okay. Request timeout. I'll cancel that in a minute. Ugh, stop. Right. This time I'm just going to run it and I'm going to pass the dash origin flag. I'll leave that to run just a little bit and then I'll cancel it. Oh. That's what happens if you're not patient and try and cancel it. Whoa. Okay. Okay, I'm going to run that again with just depth 1. Okay, now if I cut the links for, because I passed the origin, so you can see here, it's got the link, and then it puts, in the same way as GAP does, it puts the origin link of the response, the request of the response it found the link in, if that makes sense. Okay. I would definitely read the full README of this because there's a lot of things to go through. So if you decide you want to use another crawler because this is a dumb crawler, then probably Katana's at the top of your list. I think it should be because it has headless mode. It can do much better than other crawlers, and there's a lot of decent features. So I'm just going to run an example here of Katana. I'll explain why in a minute when I'm suddenly using other people's tools. But so this is similar. I'm running Katana over Tesla, for example, but I'm using headless. The CS is like a scope filter on XN LinkFinder, so saying only interested in Tesla.com. I think that's JavaScript crawl as well. Can't remember what AFF is. Might put into that. But on Katana, again, if you actually look at the help and the README and look at all the different arguments, Katana has a save requests option where you can save a directory of, save response, where you can save the responses of Katana. And Katana's running anyway, so it's a good idea to save those, because what you can do, run Katana, and then with the many uses of XN LinkFinder, once that has finished, then you can run XN LinkFinder over the Katana responses directory, and you can find extra links, but also you can find potential parameters and custom word list and out of scope domains that Katana wouldn't have given you. So you can use the functionality of XN LinkFinder and GAP, but use it on the results of Katana, if that makes sense. I'll just cancel that. So that would be, I basically say XN LinkFinder just pass that directory I just created, and the same again, specify your output files, prefix, and again, I'm using depth 0 because I don't want to try and crawl those links, but yeah, that's an extra benefit of XN LinkFinder. You can run it over the responses of other tools as well if it does output anything. And also, actually, I don't know about if anyone knows about FUF, that also can output response bodies to a folder. So for example, in the FUF RC config file, just grab this example here. Yeah, in the FUF RC config, you can actually specify that to, anytime you run FUF, it will actually save all the bodies in a directory for you. And again, you could run XN LinkFinder over that and get some extra wins out of that. I think that's about it. If anyone has any questions about LinkFinder, XN LinkFinder, I should say, because it's not LinkFinder, because that's an old tool. Boom.
LinkFinder is
And that's
shit.
another.
XN LinkFinder is
Yeah.
amazing.
XN LinkFinder was originally based on, I think, Gerard Garabo, I think. I started off with that regex and then built it and kept improving it more and more on there. So again, that's, if I ever see anyone tweeting that they're using LinkFinder, I try and control my myself without saying why.
Definitely.
And obviously, this is the best tool I've ever written here, called Alien, where you can just get them to burst out of you.
Thanks so much for the talk on the tools. But yeah, if anybody's got any last minute questions, throw them in and we'll try to get them answered. If not, we'll all definitely be in like the T-Mobile hunt channels either tonight or tomorrow.
Cool.
I will be uploading this a little later tonight and should have it out for everybody.
It's a shameless plug if anyone wants to buy me a coffee. If they've ever made any nice bounties for my tools, and the extra caffeine might help me do some more improvements.
It helps him stay up till 5 a.m. his time, so he can help us on on problems late at night for us.
Yeah. I would also say as well, if anyone's got any questions, issues, suggestions, etc., don't hesitate. Raise a GitHub issue. I sometimes worry that there could be a problem for days, and probably I don't know how many people has probably seen it, but don't bother saying anything, and then someone will eventually say it. Well, I'm like, oh my god, loads of people probably had that and just not bothered saying anything. But you can DM me on Twitter, Discord if you've got any questions. I'm happy to try and help or solve any issues or do changes. Quite often people will come to me and say, this isn't, I really needed to do this, and I'll have a change out by the end of the day just to make life easier. So yeah, thanks for coming and listening, and hopefully you guys will have the edge over a lot of other hunters using those tools now. So thanks for listening.